Trump signs the COVID stimulus bill, a bomb goes off in Nashville, and Kamala Harris is now celebrating Kwanzaa. I'll be getting into that and more on The William Hall Show. I hope everyone had a great Christmas. I hope that you were able to spend a lot of time with your family and get your mind off of politics for a little bit. And luckily, the news was fairly slow, except for a few things that did happen, of course, on Christmas Day, but I will be getting into that as well. So first of all, the COVID stimulus bill. This was the $900 billion bill that I discussed on the last show. So a report came out yesterday that Trump is going to sign that, or he has already signed it. Not entirely sure yet. There's a few details that we need to dive into here. But first of all, a lot of people are getting way too ahead of themselves with this story. There were a lot of people that are kind of jumping the gun and saying, I can't believe Trump caved. Why did he do this? This bill was full of all of these foreign monies that didn't need to, or that didn't have anything to do with the virus at all. And of course, that is true, that the bill didn't have anything really to do with coronavirus. There was a ton of things packed into this omnibus bill. So the basic gist of all of this is that there are a few more details to what Trump said, and it's in his full statement. But first of all, the idea was that he was trying to get Congress to vote for the $2,000 stimulus instead of $600 per person. And the reason why this happened, the reason why Trump is signing this, and there's a few more details to get into, but the reason why he signed it is that he was actually averting a government shutdown. Now, I don't know if you remember, but there was a bill that they were trying to pass maybe 2 years ago now, or about a year ago, where Trump basically refused to sign it, and the government shut down. And people weren't able to get paid that were in government, and it was this big news outbreak. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was this overly blown situation about the government shutting down. So basically, if Trump didn't sign this stimulus bill, the government would have actually shut down on Monday night, today. So him doing this, first of all, is to make sure that the news headlines don't read, Trump refused to sign bill that kept people from getting their pay for the stimulus. That's basically what the mainstream media would have run this as. And we know that to be the case because they've done it before. They would, of course, ignore the reasons why he chose to do it. They'll ignore the fact that he was trying to get more money for American citizens, but they will run that headline saying that it's Trump's fault that you're not getting your stimulus check, and turn basically everything against him. So he put out a statement basically saying, as president of the United States, it is my responsibility to protect the people of our country from the economic devastation and hardship was caused by the coronavirus. Trump said, I understand that many small businesses have been forced to close as a result of harsh actions by Democrat-run states. Many people are back to work, but my job is not done until everyone is back to work. And of course, that is an incredibly good statement because he's shedding light on the fact that the Democrat-run states, for the most part, are completely closed. People aren't able to work at all. And the ultimate goal here is to get people back in their job and not to necessarily stuff their pockets with a bunch of cash, because all that really does is just kind of prolongs the overall issue that people that want to work should be able to work. So the big kind of detail that was missed by a lot of people is that Trump's going to use the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 and to basically try and get Congress to drop the wasteful spending that was going to basically allow for him to boost the amount that was going to go into the stimulus checks. So Trump said that he would sign the bill along with making a few changes under the Impoundment Control Act. This allows the president to impound funds when he transmits a special message in accordance with the ICA. So effectively averting funds and moving that towards what it should be, which is the American people. So he said in a longer statement, I will sign the omnibus and COVID package with a strong message that makes clear to Congress that wasteful items need to be removed. He's talking about of course, the foreign aid, a lot of the things that were going to museums and places that are closed. Doesn't make sense. He said, I will send back to Congress a red line version, item by item, accompanied by the formal rescission request to Congress, insisting that those funds be removed from the bill, Trump said. I am signing this bill to restore unemployment benefits stop evictions, provide rental assistance, add money to PPP, return our airline workers back to work, add substantially more money for vaccine distribution, and much, much more. So this is a big deal. And like I said, a lot of people really kind of miss this idea. He's signing it, but he's sending it back with things crossed out, effectively. It's like a checklist. And he's saying, no, I'm not agreeing to these things, but I am agreeing to these other things that are actually helping the American people. And here are my conditions. That's effectively what is going on. This bill from the start should have been America first. And there's a ton of information about that already that I've discussed. But basically, this is a good thing because at the same time, Trump was able to keep the news from reporting that it was him that was holding up the stimulus check and lying and putting out headlines that way, because they would. Of course, the headline would say that, and then in the text, maybe at the very last part of the article, they'll say something like, well, he was actually on a video saying something like more money for everybody, things that people most of the time aren't going to see. So it just kind of builds this animosity towards President Trump. But the point is that he's able to dodge that bullet and yet find a workaround to actually still allow for him to make some changes to this bill. So he said on Monday the House will vote to increase payments to individuals from $600 to $2,000. Therefore, a family of four would receive $5,200. Additionally, Congress has promised that Section 230, which so unfairly benefits big tech at the expense of the American people, will be reviewed and either be terminated or substantially reformed. So he's kind of stuffing the Section 230 stuff in there as well, which is dealing with the publisher kind of aspect of online companies like Twitter. Like, are they a publisher or are they a platform? And kind of going against that, because Section 230 obviously does need to be reformed. So if this works the way that he's intending it to, that is what we need. That is what is needed most, is actual money for the American people that is helping to stimulate the economy. That was the original kind of point that came from the original stimulus bill, was that this is money that we're injecting back into the economy. It's already your tax dollar. So here you go, take it and use that. And now after 10 months of absolutely nothing, we're getting even less. And a lot of our taxpayer dollars are going elsewhere. So, of course, that is good news that Trump is actually trying to do this. So, have to be a little bit careful to make sure that we're reading the full story of all of this stuff instead of just kind of the headline and assuming that we know what's going on when in fact we don't. And we're just kind of reading bits and pieces of information instead of the actual president's message that he sent out to everybody, or at least that press release. So, in another story, some of you may have heard about this. A bomb went off in Nashville on Christmas Day. So this was a massive kind of thing that really didn't get a lot of attention, I'm surprised by. A bomb going off on Christmas Day, you would think, would be a pretty big deal. So I think it was because it was a fairly small explosion, from my understanding of it. From what I saw from the different articles and stuff, no one else was hurt. As far as we know, the man in question that the FBI, which was investigating, believes to be the actual person that did set off the bomb, actually died in the explosion himself. So not really sure. Now, of course, I'm not going to divulge the name of this person. A lot of times people like this are doing this for attention. That's why they wait till massive holidays for it to kind of blow up in the news and get everyone's attention. And just kind of bring attention to themselves. So I'm not going to do that. And I know a lot of other people refuse from doing that as well, so that we can make sure that this suspect is not getting what they want, that they're not getting this idea. There was even a statement that came out today, or at least a report from somebody that said that he mentioned to this person that he wanted that everyone's going to remember him forever. And we want to make sure that, of course, does not happen. So as a result, I'm not going to at least actually report on his name. But a Christmas Day explosion jolted the city awake on Friday morning and disrupted communication lines in the area. Some residents who live near the blast site described waking up to the sound of gunfire and then hearing a warning to leave the area, emanating from an RV. And this RV was also caught on video as well. So as far as we know, there's no motive present for this. We don't know what the guy's motive was. Maybe it was just for attention. Not really entirely sure. Now, an FBI special agent put out a statement saying, we're still following leads, but right now there's no indication that any other persons were involved. Authorities have declined to call the bombing an act of domestic terrorism, noting that such a designation would require knowing that the suspect had a motive tied to a broader aim. When we assess an event for domestic terrorism, it has to be tied to an ideology. They're looking for things like social ideology, a political kind of message or something like that. But as far as they can tell, there's nothing really there. So at least as far as we know. So this is kind of a ongoing investigation. They are pretty confident that they know who exactly did this. Really, the question comes down to why. Well, did they put out any other statements? Is there more than hearsay at this point? Not really sure. And of course, I will keep you updated as information comes out on that story. But just really quickly, I do have a Patreon as well where you can subscribe to the William Hall Show and help support the work that I do here. And this show is also available on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify so that you can listen to the audio-only versions. Over the weekend, a Breonna Taylor sculpture was actually destroyed, or at least vandalized, or something to that effect. And this was put up by a sculptor named Leo Carson. They basically put up a sculpture and had all of the inner workings and all pictures and things like that was on it. It was almost like a memorial type of thing, basically. But they said that it was in support of Black Lives Matter. That was why he actually did the sculpture there. And in an interview, the guy, Leo Carson, that actually made the sculpture said, "This vandalism is an act of racist aggression, and it shows why sculpture and art matters. I made the sculpture to support the Black Lives Matter movement, and while I'm overcome with rage and sadness at their cowardly act, their vandalism will make her even more potent." Here's the biggest problem with all of this in this statement. He said, "And this shows why sculpture and art matters." I want to take a second to just go back to the last, 4 years of a lot of these people from Black Lives Matter and other left-wing organizations that have actively destroyed, petitioned to get rid of, or just outright vandalize statues of historical figures. The problem with the people with BLM, and when we look at this Breonna Taylor case, which I'll get to in a little bit, because there's a lot there, but the problem with these people with BLM and stuff is that they only see the world through one perspective. They can't possibly visualize it from the perspective of a normal human being that's just looking at the facts of a case. And the problem is that on one hand, you get mad because your Breonna Taylor statue got destroyed or vandalized, but you'll be the same one trying to tear down a Lincoln statue, the same ones trying to tear down Washington, trying to tell people that there's certain art that they can't have or see or play because we need to get rid of everything in society that possibly they disagree with. That is the message that they've sent. And now it's pretty interesting to see them literally just reverse their entire position when it's Breonna Taylor. Now, of course, the reason why this statue was actually vandalized is because Breonna Taylor was not a victim of police brutality. Now, there's a lot of details that have gone out, and the media still lies about this. I mean, the media still lies about this. Twitter still lies about this. Everybody still lies about this woman and what actually happened. They first of all talk about the fact that there was no knock warrant. The truth is that the police did have a no-knock warrant, but they did knock. That was actually in the police report, but because nobody felt like looking at it, of course, they don't say anything about it and just assume that you're too stupid to understand that. So they did knock on her door. That's basically what happened. They said police, and what happened is Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, this was not her husband, contrary to other claims that were made, basically shot out of the door. He fired a shot straight at the police through the door while the door was closed. The police, of course, when a shot is fired, they have the right to return fire. And that's exactly what they did. And what he did is that he moved Breonna Taylor in front of him and used her as a body shield. And she got shot and not him. Okay? Keep in mind, this guy's still alive. Her boyfriend is still alive to this day. She's the one that died. All of that stuff about her being in bed and being asleep is a complete and utter lie. That is proven at this point. But if you say the truth about it, that's going to get banned everywhere. But it's all in the police report. It's all in a police report. They just assume that most people aren't going to look that up. And that's the reason why this isn't police brutality. Because a lot of people also assume, well, she still was an innocent bystander. Look, if there's anyone to blame in her situation, it's the boyfriend. I mean, he was the one that basically put her in front of him like a coward when the police started returning fire. But the fact is that she was involved heavily in the drug trafficking arena. It was her car that they tracked back to this house, because it was her car that was going from the actual main drug house and back to her house, and back and forth and back and forth. And they were tracing this entire time. I mean, getting a warrant doesn't come easily. You have to have substantial proof showing that what you're doing is 100% pretty much verified that these are the people that are doing whatever illegal activities you're trying to catch them for. So that's basically the gist of what happened. It doesn't matter that she was an EMT. Your job doesn't dictate how good of a person you are. I mean, let's also forget about entirely the fact that she had a dead body in a rental car that she left at the rental place. I mean, what was that about? Nobody's asking this question. Now, I'm not saying she killed somebody. I don't know what happened. To this day, we don't have much information besides the fact that she did get contacted by the police because she turned in a rental car with a dead person in the trunk. And everybody's going to act like she was just this upstanding citizen, when that is a complete lie. So that is the reason why people are upset about basically memorializing somebody that was not this upstanding citizen. What she's representing to BLM is this saint that has done no wrong and has done everything correctly in her life, and she was just trying to save people, and she was asleep. But that's all built on an entire bold-faced lie. So if anything comes out of this, I think it's actually going to be more so the fact that people are going to look up the actual details. Well, I hope they look up the actual details and see that she was actually not the citizen that they were trying to make her out to be, because that's just not true whatsoever. And in my opinion, it's wrong to destroy sculptures regardless. Okay, I don't care if it's art. I don't care who it is. The point is that destroying property is wrong in any light. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with the position. The problem is that the left does not look at things that way. But when it happens to them, this perfectly exposes their hypocrisy. It perfectly exposes the fact that they are willing to do anything they can to destroy systematic racism in their book, but on the other hand, come out to defend and say that this was an act of racism. Oh my goodness, how could they possibly do this to this person that was effectively going to go to jail if they were alive today? So that basically perfectly sums up exactly how they can, on one hand, believe one thing, and then all of a sudden when it directly affects them, all of a sudden they change their opinion, of course, because that is hypocrisy at its finest. So in another story, a Chinese journalist was actually sentenced to jail because they reported on the coronavirus in Wuhan. So basically, a Chinese court sentenced a citizen journalist who reported on conditions inside Wuhan where the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19 first emerged. They did this to 4 years in prison for picking quarrels with the communist government. And this is a perfect example of why we don't want communism here and why it shouldn't really be anywhere else. This is a big deal because I think a lot of people forgot the first stages of what happened during the coronavirus. But I remember when everybody was confused. We knew something was going on in China. There were pictures of them spraying weird stuff all over the streets. And we were like, what is happening? And we didn't get any information. All we had was barely anything, just some videos that managed to get out to us. And there were reports at the time of a journalist trying to report about it that were somehow just silenced out of nowhere. Most of them, at least the one that I know of, died of coronavirus shortly after that. But pretty odd for them to be sentencing somebody for 4 years for picking quarrels with the communist government. I mean, really what it sounds like is that they were disagreeing with them, that they were trying to expose what actually happened. And this is the reason why we have free speech in the United States. This is why we believe in this. Because in places where you don't have free speech, the government is allowed to do this. They're allowed to do whatever they want. I mean, good luck talking trash about Trump or saying something bad about a governor or a senator, or going around saying that the United States is systematically racist, because you'll be thrown in jail if you did the same thing in China, you would be thrown in jail. And I put a post about this months and months ago, but I basically said if Democrats got the government they want, they wouldn't even be able to protest against it. And this never crosses their mind because they don't understand. The thing is that when things go your way, when they agree with what you agree with, things are all great in your world. But the second that somebody gets in there that has the same control that doesn't agree with what you agree with, then all of a sudden it's a problem. And then you realize the mistake that you made. We don't want a government like this here at all. And we must never forget what China did. They were the ones that kept the world from being able to prepare for this virus. Because none of the information that they had or received or that people were reporting on was ever accessible to anybody outside of China, really. So that creates a lot of issues. It made us completely unprepared. So one of the first things Trump did, and he continues to talk about this, is that he shut down travel from China. And nobody even cares because him saying that just puts more attention on the fact that China was where this started at. I can tell you right now, if the same thing happened in the United States, this wouldn't be a problem because we have a government where people are able to actually do stuff, and actually talk about it and actually figure out a plan for it. It would have never have gotten to this point worldwide, at least most likely, because we weren't trying to cover it up at the same time. By the time anybody had any information about it, it was already out. It was spread everywhere at that point. They were shutting down airports, and that is a sad reality. China, of course, claims that it did everything it could to stop the virus from spreading when it admits that the virus exists at all, because most of the time they don't. It also claims now that the pandemic has been brought to a halt inside its borders and that Wuhan has had no cases of COVID-19 for some months, even as the world battles the second wave of the virus, which, of course, that is a complete lie. China lies all the time. I mean, who in their right mind is going to believe that? There's not one place in the United States where no cases have happened in months. I mean, what? This is the epicenter. You're telling me the epicenter of the virus, where this all started at, has had 0 cases in months? If this doesn't prove that China can't be trusted as a country, I don't understand what else you want. It just doesn't work. Nobody knew what was going on in the beginning because of China, and it spread as bad as it did because of China. It is absolutely their fault, and it's not racist to bring attention to that fact. So Kamala Harris is now celebrating Kwanzaa all of a sudden. Now, if you know anything about Kwanzaa, it is a completely, entirely a made-up holiday. It's not real. It's fake. It was just something that people just decided to do, and then you had a bunch of black people basically claiming, oh, it's like our version of Christmas for some reason. So it's just a complete lie. So Kwanzaa was actually invented in 1966 by a convicted felon. Okay, now Kamala Harris, she was born in 1964, but yet Kamala Harris is the one that puts out a statement saying, my sister and I, we grew up celebrating Kwanzaa. Every year, our family would, and our extended family, we would gather around across multiple generations and we'd share stories. The kids would sit on the carpet and the elders would sit in their chairs and we would light the candles. And of course, after have a beautiful meal. And of course, there was always the discussion of the 7 principles. And essentially it's about be and do. Be the person you want to be and do the things you want to do and do the things that need to be done. She continued, it's about not letting anyone write our future for us, but instead going out and writing it for ourselves. Now, of course, this entire statement is just completely made up. I mean, this has nothing to do with anything at all. I mean, because Kwanzaa literally was created like around 50 years ago, she's just attaching a meaning to it because she feels like she can attach whatever meaning she wants to it. Now, if you also recall, just about, I think, a week ago, she put out a video with her husband, which is Jewish, basically talking about how they celebrate Hanukkah.
Hey everybody, we're here to talk about one of our favorite holidays in our big modern family.
Hanukkah.
And why do you love Hanukkah?
I love Hanukkah because it really is about the light and bringing light where there has been darkness. And there is so much work to be done in the world to bring light. And it is a celebration of always Tikkun Olam, which is about fighting for justice and fighting for the dignity of all people. And it's about rededication.
And it's about joy.
And it's about joy.
And it's about spreading joy around the world and sharing it with your family and your friends and your neighbors and your community.
And there she goes again with these empty words. They mean nothing. It's just light, 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 and more light, because light and light. Like, what does that even mean? Like, what are you talking about? It's clear that she doesn't know what she's talking about. You can't simultaneously be celebrating Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all of the rest of these things like this all at the same time, attaching all of these random meanings to it just because you feel like it. That's what we call pandering. This is a perfect example of that, because she doesn't really celebrate Hanukkah, or she doesn't really celebrate Kwanzaa. It's just that she's trying to appeal to all of these people that do this, apparently, and try to pretend as if she's somehow one of them. And as I mentioned earlier with the dates, she was born in 1964. Kwanzaa was actually started in 1966. Now, the chances that she grew up celebrating this are near impossible, because if a holiday started and she was born 2 years later, it would have taken 10, 20 years before that tradition even became something that people even adapted. I can start my own holiday today. Let's just say I start my own holiday and I start spreading the news and I tell everybody, hey, look, I got this holiday going on this day. How long do you think it's going to take before people can say, yeah, I grew up celebrating this thing that was created 2 years before I was born? Pretty much no one. So it's just a complete lie. This isn't the first lie she's told. She had the whole story with her listening to Tupac, even though the album wasn't even out yet. And there's a lot of these other issues, but she's just completely lying about everything that she does just to try and fit in this narrative that she believes in. This is the meaning she would attach to almost anything, just to push her narrative of what she believes. Just do yourself. Don't let anybody tell you what you can do. It sounds like a motivational speech. Not anything to do with a holiday at all. So it's just an obvious lie. And it didn't really, like I said, there were reports in here that basically came out after the fact saying that it didn't really take hold until the 70s and early 80s. But somehow her family is heavily devoted to celebrating this thing. Once again, Kamala Harris is she's kind of just an empty suit. She's just a person that just kind of will pander to whatever. She doesn't have to know anything about it, as you saw from the Hanukkah video. She just talks and says stuff and kind of hopes that in some way somebody is crazy enough to actually think that she knows what she's talking about, when in reality she doesn't. So last on the list, I watched Wonder Woman 1964, and it was terrible. Okay, now I liked the first Wonder Woman. Okay, so that already kind of starts it off there. I like the first Wonder Woman, and before I get into any more, I'm not going to spoil anything because I want to give time for people to watch it. But it is on HBO Max, I believe, and it's also in theaters. But number one, the writing and pacing was entirely off. This was one of the worst written and paced movies I've ever seen, specifically for a hero type of film. There were so many times when you just kind of had the just slow, nothing really happening, and some things that were, when the action was happening, even it was boring because it just dragged for so long for no reason at all. It was just, let's just fill in time. This movie is almost 2.5 hours long, which is extremely long for a hero type of film. And I'm telling you right now, there's going to be about 30, 45 minutes or so in there that you can entirely cut out of this film, and it will be no different. No different. It does not feel like a hero film, so if you're going there to see a lot of action, this is not going to happen. There's way more just talking. It feels like a romantic comedy type of thing. It's really awkward. The acting's really odd. Gal Gadot did a fine job, and the antagonist guy, he did a fine job as well, but just the rest of it was not good whatsoever. There was a point where she started using a power that she's never used before, that nobody knew that she had. I haven't seen anything this bad in a while as far as it goes for big budget movies. And this one being a $200 million budget, which is really bad considering what it is. And the CGI is just the worst I've seen in a budgeted film like this. I can't believe, I don't know where their money went. The whole $200 million, but it surely wasn't on the production whatsoever. So there were a few articles that actually came out about a week ago before the movie came out, basically saying that the villain in the film was a Trump-esque figure. Now, that is not true. You'll have to let me know in the comments or whatever it is if you think that, but from what I saw, this guy had no relation to Trump whatsoever. I mean, I don't even want to imagine how Hollywood would even depict Trump besides nothing but negative. Now, the movie is a little woke, and a lot of people were concerned about that. I mean, there's a lot of scenes of just kind of men are evil, men are bad, men are going to hurt you if you're walking down the street, and basically there's kind of a point where it's trying to allude to the fact that it's like, oh, there's this woman and she wants attention from men, and it shows this toxic masculinity because they're all ignoring her. And oh, she did this and they ignored her. They walked past her. She dropped something. They didn't help her pick it up. There's that kind of thrown in there, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's too much attention for men when everything changes, right? Like you can't have it both ways, and this film tries to have it both ways so much. It's pretty obvious. Now, even without the woke stuff, it's just technically a bad film. There's just nothing really in it that I think that a lot of people will enjoy. I mean, great, if you want to turn your mind off and kind of just watch something, I think it's fine. I don't think it's overtly political, but there's definitely a lot of the man-hating stuff in there. So if that's not something you're a fan of, don't watch it, or watch it and let me know what you think about it as well. So either way, I give it like a 4 out of 10 maybe, if I were to attach a score to it. It's not the worst movie I've seen, but it's definitely a massive step down from the first one and from what you come to expect from a lot of different DC films, especially the more recent ones. Either way, that is all I have for you today, and I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you on the next one. You just watched an episode from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.